Welcome back to the channel. Thank you guys for hanging with me on this Friday. All right, we are in December. It is a little bit of fall fishing, a little bit of winter fishing. You'll start to have fish act like they are in the pre-spawn, depending on where you're at in the country. And it is going to be really fun if you can handle the cold weather, because this is the time of year where you get that element of surprise from big fish. You'll be fishing around in an area that you fished the last couple months. Biggest fish you probably caught in there was 4 pounds. This is when those 6-pounders start showing up. And it is a magical time of year to just have big fish coming into your areas. You may be catching a bunch of 12 inchers and then boom, giant. So you don't necessarily do that a whole lot in the fall, if ever, but now is the time where you can really catch a game changer, difference maker size bass. But I'm gonna give you a couple different situations, the baits that I think are very important, and the baits that are gonna work on the tough days, because on the easy days, you don't necessarily need to have all these little intricate details in line. You can go out there and just throw a lipless crankbait, go out there and jerk bait, do all these things. The tough days are the important days to know what to be throwing. So I'm going to start with those little swim baits. You can throw it on a little 3/8 ounce head if you're fishing shallow, go up in size if you're fishing a little bit deeper, but Keitech Swing Impact Fat is your friend in the colder months. It could be on an Alabama rig or a jig head, but that is a key player. And on those days where you have high sun, you need to keep a bait low in the water column, but you also don't want, to give the fish too much. That swim bait is going to be your friend. Now, you kind of have a little bit more favorable conditions. That's where the swim jig is going to come in for me. I still like a little Keitech swim bait on the back. That's the shiner, but subtle baits this time of year when you don't necessarily have the best conditions, and a fluke. We're not necessarily out of like the whole fall situation, so you're going to have bass still setting up like they do in the fall. You're going to have to cover a lot of water. You're going to have bait all over the place. A fluke is a really good bait on those tougher days. Now, as we get into the windy conditions, the cloudy conditions, the spinner bait is a killer bait. And you're going to have water that's down in the high 40s, and I really like to crank this time of year. So if you're out in that 4 foot range, DT6, if you're getting a little bit shallow, your square bills, your rounded bill crankbaits like a Lucky Craft Fat BDS2, really good bait. And then also on those really windy days, or if you're fishing extreme flats, lipless crankbaits. And I'll give you a tip here. If you're throwing a 1/2 ounce and you're just constantly fighting the bottom, you're constantly bringing back that dead mucky bottom that most lakes have a bunch of on the bottoms in December, when a lot of things are dying, the lakes are just mucking up. Bass will stay in that mucky stuff for heat, especially when that water cools off. Go to that 1/4 ounce. So if you're constantly fighting the grass, go to that 1/4. It's going to be a lot easier to fish. You're going to keep it up in the water column, and that 1/4 ounce is probably doing a better job matching the size shad that are in these areas. So try those baits this time of year, guys. Here's one more key. The creeks. I think it's very important to focus a lot of your energy on the creek channels and then the backs of creeks. Not only are the shad going to be pushed back, they're really good by this time, but it's a lot easier to dissect. So I'm going to go into basically how I'm going to fish a creek. Now, a jig is a very important bait this time of year, because anytime you're around some isolated wood, it is smart to slow down and fish every little piece of that wood. So if it's one isolated dock, or maybe it's just one laydown, go in there, make 5 or 15 casts on that wood before you move into all those moving baits. Now, creeks are very fun this time of year, because this is the time of year that they're really going to start to turn on. Now, most of the fish are going to be out in the creek channel. So if you don't have any channel swing banks or anything like that, most of those big fish are going to be out in the creek channel, and the scoper guys are going to be out there fishing for them. But if you do have some creek channels along the banks, that's a great place to start. And you've got to read a creek with the conditions that you've had leading up to that point. So what I mean by that, bass are typically going to use the backs of the creeks. That's the most prevalent area for bass to hang out. Now, bass will leave the backs and head to the secondary points when you have a big rain. If there's an influx of mud coming into the lake, you're going to have fish that are going to push from the backs of the creeks out to their secondary points. Now, there's going to be a place in that creek where a lot of those fish are going to migrate to. Points, pockets, little drains, things like that is where a lot of fish are going to hang out. And then any of the creek channels around those areas are going to be good. But I think it's very important that there is a lot of dead water in the creeks, and there are a lot of places where fish are going to move to. But for the majority of the time, they're going to stay in a general 1 to 2 mile stretch. Then you're going to have a couple miles where it's just nothing. So don't let the creeks get you down because you're not catching anything. Once you get around them and you figure them out that day, creeks can be super productive and can tell you a lot about what's happening on your lake. Try those baits. Good luck to you guys, and I'll see you on the water.